The Chicago Bears only have one more game left in the regular season to make the playoffs, and it's as simple as win and you're in. What is going on, y'all? Faiz Sports Talk back at it with another video talking, of course, some NFL. So if you are new to the channel, make sure to go ahead and subscribe, especially if you're a Bears fan, and make sure you are following me on all my social media. And speaking of social media, you guys have been bombarding me, slamming me with all these questions about the playoff scenarios. And by the way, I love it when you guys reach out. This is not complaining or anything. I'm just saying you guys are reaching out and asking me all these questions about not just the Bears playoff scenarios, but the Rams, the Cardinals, the Packers, every team pretty much in the NFC. So I thought, why not just put it all in the video for you guys, right? So that's what I'm going to do here, talk about all of the Bears playoff scenarios and just go through each of them and hopefully explain and make it clear for you guys, okay? So with that being said, again, make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you have the post notifications turned on, folks. It's an exciting time right now to be a Bears fan, especially to play meaningful football this late in the year. I love it. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's keep it very simple and just focus on the Bears. What is the Bears playoff scenario? I mentioned it already. Win and you're in. That's it. If you want to keep it very simple, just as simple as it gets, super basic, the Bears win against the Packers in Week 17. They're in the playoffs no matter what. No matter what happens with any other team, the Cardinals, Rams, etc. It is over. The Bears are in the playoffs. Now, if the Bears don't win against the Packers, which very well could happen, what are the scenarios? Now it starts to get complicated, okay? So, I've broken it down for you guys. Here we go. Let me pull up my little whiteboard here for you guys. So, essentially, if the Bears will clinch a playoff spot, and I haven't even talked about, where the wild card would rank, right? Would it be the 7th spot? I'll get to that in a second. But this is essentially just to clinch a wild card spot with a Bears win, like I mentioned, or if the Cardinals lose to the Rams, okay, or the Bears tie and the Cardinals tie, which won't happen. I mean, it's like a 99.9999% chance of it happening, or not happening, I should say. So this scenario, I mean, technically it's just there because of technicalities, but you get my point. Essentially, the Bears need to win, or if the Bears lose, the Cardinals need to lose, right? So that's what needs to happen. And I have this little, comment right here, which says Cards tiebreaker over Rams, Bears. This is greater than Cards, meaning the Bears have the tiebreaker over the Cards. Why is that important? So here's why. So essentially, like I got back here where I said the Bears win and they're in. Let's say they don't win against the Packers next week, right? Cardinals have to lose against the Rams. Now, there's a lot of injury implications on the line. Jared Goff has a thumb injury. Kyler Murray has an injury as well. We don't know what's going to happen there. Just saying. So it's going to be really crazy. But essentially, if the Cardinals win against the Rams, then and the Bears lose against the Packers, the Bears are out, right? But what happens in the scenario where the Bears lose and, the Bears win, the Cardinals win, and so if the Cardinals win, the Rams would lose at that point. So if the Bears and the Cardinals both win, the Rams would get knocked out. And that's why I had that little blurb there, because if all three teams have the same record at 9-7, the Rams do not have the tiebreaker over the Cardinals, because you would go division first. So division-wise, the Cardinals have the tiebreaker over the Rams, and so that would put the Cardinals ahead. And then when you compare the Cardinals with the Bears have the tiebreaker over the Cardinals, so it would go Bears, Cardinals, then Rams. And so essentially at that point, you would see that the Bears in that scenario would be the 6th seed, and then the Cardinals would be the 7th seed, and then the Rams would be out of the playoffs. So yes, there is a scenario in which the Rams, as good of a season as they've had, don't make the playoffs, and that is the scenario. So I hope I'm not confusing you guys. And as far as the tiebreaker is concerned, it's essentially based off of conference record, and then if conference record is tied and you got to move on to something else, they look at common opponent record, right? What is your record against the same teams that you've gone against? So that's how the tiebreaker is determined, if you guys want to get into the nitty-gritty of that. So essentially, the Bears have the tiebreaker over the Cardinals, and the Cardinals have the tiebreaker over the Rams. All right, now let's talk about the Packers and their playoff scenario. So the Packers are the Bears' Week 17 opponent, and the Packers, as we all know, are gunning for that number 1 seed. Now, everybody assumed, including myself, that the Packers were going to rest their starters in Week 17 against the Bears. Well, that's not happening anymore. Okay, so for all of you guys asking, not happening. The Packers are still in play for the number 1 seed. They have not locked it up because the Seattle Seahawks beat the Los Angeles Rams in Week 16. So let's explain the Packers scenarios here. But essentially, the main part of the question here of will the Packers sit their starters, essentially I just answered it, which is no. So we're going to get a full-strength Packers team against the Bears in Week 17, unfortunately. Okay, so let's talk about these scenarios here. So Green Bay clinches the 1 seed and a bye in the first round if they win or the Seahawks lose or tie. All right, so for the Packers, they have a lot of incentive to win because if they win, no matter what happens, they get the number 1 seed. Now, if they lose and, Seattle wins, they could fall out of that number 1 seed. So I've also included here, if you guys can tell, these are the tiebreakers. So the Seahawks have the tiebreaker over the Packers. So yes, in fact, if the Packers lose and the Seahawks win, the Seahawks will have the number 1 seed. Now, the Saints are also in the picture here where I have the Saints having the tiebreaker over the Seattle Seahawks. Okay? So if we're talking about these two teams, the Saints have the tiebreaker. Well, Faiz, what if all 3 teams have the same record? Well, then the number 1 seed goes to the Saints. They've got the tiebreaker over both the Seahawks and the Packers, okay? And again, Seahawks are listed second here because they've got the tiebreaker over Green Bay, so Green Bay's last. So essentially, what I'm trying to show you here is the Packers have a lot of incentive to play their full starters and play Week 17 and try to win because the number 1 seed and a first-round bye is on the line. That's on the line. And if the Packers lose, there's a lot of possibilities of them getting knocked out of their number 1 spot. So, essentially, folks, there is no doubt about it now. We are getting, and when I say we, the Bears, I should say, are getting a full-strength Packers team. So, you know what? It's going to be very tough, but I wouldn't have it any other way because you know what, folks? To be the man, you got to beat the man, all right? I'm sorry to quote it, but it is very, very relevant at this point. The road to the playoffs is going to go through Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. And if this Bears team, specifically, Ryan Pace, Matt Nagy, and Mitchell Trubisky, 3 of the guys that have had the most pressure on them this season and certainly have had their jobs on the line multiple times this season, if all 3 of them, are able to pull this out, specifically Mitch and Matt Nagy, of course, but Ryan Pace also built the team. If they are victorious over the Packers, folks, I mean, that is going to be a huge accomplishment, right? So I'm just saying, look, I'd love to be in the playoffs. And if you still ask me right now, Faiz, do you prefer them sit their starters or not? I would prefer them sitting their starters. But if you had any questions about this team, this game is going to answer it. This game is going to answer it because we're going up against the MVP. Aaron Rodgers is going to win the MVP. He is going to win the MVP over Patrick Mahomes. I have no doubt about it now. So you're going up against the MVP, the potential number 1 seed. And if you beat them, and you get into the playoffs, I mean, at that point, I'll bring Matt Nagy, Ryan Pace, and Mitchell Trubisky back. Just for that win, man, at that point again. So this is going to be crazy. I'm hyped, man. And you know what? This is what it's all about. Playing meaningful football late in the year. And I'm just grateful for it. Win, lose, or tie. Hopefully it's not a tie, but win, lose, or tie. Let's see what happens. So there you have it, folks. I hope that helped explain all the playoff scenarios. Essentially, win and you're in. We need the Bears to win. Let's go Bears, and I'll talk to you guys later.